everything going on today, or should I say yesterday, regarding the NFL anthem protests, or as I like to call them, just demonstrations or displays, is the logical conclusion of something that is, as we see with the election, the relitigation of 2016. People don't understand that what Colin Kaepernick did in 2016 was an ineffective gesture in order to get him a starting role on a team that he didn't really get along with anymore. It's not to say that he doesn't have the right to do what he's doing or what he did because he's not playing in the league right now, or that they don't have the right to protest the anthem by sitting down or by raising their fist or kneeling or staying in the locker room. Technically, people have the right to do whatever they want so long as it's not illegal. Then again, until recently, I remember that people would get fined for doing things like wearing the wrong product logo on their uniform. That happened, I think it was 2 years ago, to Cam Newton for displaying in a very discreet place on his helmet the Under Armour logo. So what is the NFL talking about? This is complete fantasy. They don't believe in freedom of speech. If they believed in freedom of speech, then they wouldn't fine people for criticizing referees. They wouldn't fine people for talking about concussions or objecting to some of the NFL's legal procedures. Freedom of speech is always one of those nebulous areas that when you get to your space with your employer, it kind of becomes problematic and just a gray area. Problematic is one of those weasel words that new social justice warriors use to talk about issues where they want to decide what people can or cannot say. And I always bring it back to a discussion I heard about 3 or 4 years ago when Michael Sam got drafted on CBS Sports Radio, where Amy Lawrence, the host, said that she was opening the phone lines, but she didn't want to hear certain opinions that were hostile or intolerant or dismissive of Michael Sam's impact and how special the moment was. Well, if you don't want to hear what people really want to say, then don't have a discussion at all, because then it's not really a discussion. This is something that I think is just permeating our society right now. What are the real bounds for, self-expression and what people can say or not say in the workplace? But remember, if Colin Kaepernick can go to his job and make some sort of bizarre political statement, whatever it is. I mean, let's say that this one is justified. Then does that mean that I can go to my job and start spouting off about my feelings on the Catholic Church? If I wanted to just declare all sorts of weird theories, like straight out of a Dan Brown novel, like the Da Vinci Code, and start harassing Catholic coworkers. Would that be appropriate? Because I mean, what if those were my personal beliefs? And I want to stand up for them. I think that it's unjust that those things aren't being represented. Or conversely, what if I wanted to convert people in the workplace to my religion? Is that okay? Because the only thing that this whole phenomenon draws from is the First Amendment. However, the First Amendment is not necessarily holding in the workplace. Your boss or the organization you work for does have the right in your contract to determine what is acceptable and not acceptable in terms of speech that you do on the job. Even in some cases, outside of the workplace. And in a lot of these contracts, these players are not allowed to say or do things that otherwise are not illegal and are perfectly acceptable. If there were to be an NFL player that would start talking about how he visits prostitutes in Amsterdam, I can assure you that the NFL would not take kindly to him and would probably try to suspend him because it would be unbecoming of their opinion of how the league should conduct itself. Now, what this gets into when you really think about it, when this protest reaches its logical conclusion, and it kind of has. I don't know where it's going to go from now on, so we'll have to just take a look. Today, there were a number of teams that didn't even show up at all for the national anthem: Tennessee, Seattle, and Pittsburgh, except for one Pittsburgh player that did go out of the tunnel and stood for the anthem. Actually, I think he stood in the tunnel, Danny Villanueva, and he just stood at attention and he instantly became a celebrity. I have the story here. It's from the Daily Caller. Steelers coach didn't want Army vet to stand for the anthem. It's not Danny Villanueva, it's Alejandro. Alejandro Villanueva. Pittsburgh Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin indicated Sunday night that he didn't not want offensive tackle Alejandro Villanueva to stand for the national anthem instead of sitting it out with the rest of his teammates. Villanueva, a former Army Ranger who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, was only Steelers player to stand for the anthem. While Villanueva stood in the tunnel, hand over his heart, the rest of the team remained in the locker room in protest of President Trump's comments that players who kneeled during the anthem should be fired. Tomlin said in a post-game press conference that he was looking for 100% participation in whatever course of action the team took during the national anthem. When asked by a reporter about Villanueva coming out for the anthem, Tomlin said, "Like I said, I was looking for 100% participation. We were going to be respectful of our football team." Villanueva played in college at the United States Military Academy before going on to become an Army Ranger. He served 3 tours in Afghanistan and was awarded the Bronze Star Medal for Valor. He signed with the Philadelphia Eagles in 2014 before later joining the Steelers. So essentially, you have here a real conundrum because originally the right to free speech was asserted in order to protect the players that were protesting the national anthem. But in this case, what they ended up doing was they said, well, now because of what Donald Trump said, and only because of that, some of these coaches, like Mike Tomlin, who I think is a fantastic head coach, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame one day, decided, well, in order to show solidarity with all the players that were, let's call it in their terms, threatened by whatever Trump said, we are going to all stay out for the national anthem. We're going to stay in the locker room. Well, at that point, you've already encroached on the freedom of speech of those players that do want to stand for the anthem. So you've already, so by dint of the fact that you are taking a stance that you're in favor of everybody taking a stance on the side of the anthem protesters, and talking about those that don't go along, they are a problem. You could be infringing on their freedom of speech. Now, he didn't say that he was going to order him to stay in the locker room or whatever else happened. We don't know whether he talked to Alejandro Villanueva and gave him, directions, and Villanueva didn't follow them. But what he was trying to say was, we are trying to be sensitive to the needs of those people, and that are participating in the anthem protest. And he even says, like I said, I was looking for 100% participation. We were going to be respectful of our football team. Well, who cares about your football team? For this person who was an Army Ranger, he wanted to be respectful to that part of his personal experience. He was an Army Ranger, served 3 tours in Afghanistan. Whatever you want to say about the NFL, that's a little more of an important priority. And I can say this because I can't necessarily take sides in this issue. You know, if I personally would stand for the anthem. The fact of the matter is, I didn't serve the U.S. military. I served the military of a different country. So for me to judge somebody on whether they would stand for the anthem or not, I think I'd be full of shit if I told people, "Oh, you must stand for the U.S. national anthem." I think it does say something though when you automatically assume that people that are opposing the protest, or that people that are expressing their dissent of the protest and saying, "Well, I for one think that I do want to stand for the anthem." I just looked up the expectation of the team that I root for, the Cowboys, and it appears that a lot of the key people on the team are more in favor of standing for the anthem. So what does that mean? Is that a statement, or are they just people who are saying, well, we want to stand for the anthem and this protest doesn't really speak to us? That's not necessarily a statement. It's just saying we prefer, you know, to stand for the anthem, and we don't think that this protest speaks for us. Is that a statement? I don't know. Sometimes a non-statement is more of a statement than um, an actual statement. Sometimes when you say nothing, you say more. It's a weird paradox. And I really think it's ironic that people are talking now. You know, freedom of speech is such a huge issue in America. So I really do. I respect the position of a lot of these anthem protesters, like Richard Sherman and what's that other guy's name? Marshawn Lynch, Mike Tomlin. I respect Mike Tomlin a great deal. Today he became an anthem protester. And a lot of these other players, I don't know whether to take them seriously. I think some of them are doing it because they've been pressured by people that are in their personal life. And that's fine. You know, if they have a lot of people that are on their phone line and saying, look, we back in Philadelphia or in Houston, we think that you should support Colin Kaepernick and sit for the anthem or whatever. If that's the pressure that they're getting, then maybe it's understandable. It's totally understandable. It just does not make sense anymore for people who, on the one hand, they're talking about, oh, we have to respect the freedom of speech of athletes. Well, the fact is that freedom of speech should be an absolute, if that's what you're trying to say. I can't go to my workplace, and believe me, there's days that I'm tempted to say things that, you know, they do reflect my opinions. I can't go there and just get into political arguments all day, or into even just sports arguments all day. It's not becoming of the workplace, and that's one of the reasons that these anthems are falling flat. People realize that these athletes can get away with pulling stunts that they couldn't in their own workplace. You know, some of these celebration plays and things like that, celebration dances. I saw today all these celebration dances in the highlights of the Pittsburgh game, and in the highlights of, I believe it was the Philadelphia game. Yeah, those types of displays, those are things that people for a long time they admired the NFL because you can do it in the NFL. You can't do it necessarily in other jobs. Now people are realizing these people are spoiled morons in some cases. Some of these people who are participating in the protests, they're not exactly the brightest bulb in the chandelier. And I'm saying that because, you know, obviously there are people who are very intelligent participants. Mike Tomlin, believe me, one of the most intelligent people in professional football nowadays. I guarantee you he will be in the Hall of Fame, and he will deserve every single accolade that's given to him there. And you know, the fact that I disagree with him on this one issue, I think is such a small, you know, it's such a small corner of his career. This is a person who, you know, he was involved in bringing another Super Bowl to Pittsburgh, team I hate, but let's face it, he is fully deserving of all the praise he's gotten. Now, the fact is that he lost today because I believe they didn't perform well. And, you can complain all you want about protests or whatever. What people will really take out of this whole affair is that is these teams, they're not focused on what's really important, and that's why there's sort of a twisted genius in what Donald Trump did, because inevitably you're going to have a lot of games where both teams were protesting and one of them just gets destroyed, like what happened in Baltimore or to Baltimore and London today. And by the very fact that they went to London and protested on foreign soil during the U.S. national anthem and then got their asses kicked by Jacksonville, that's going to have a huge effect on the mood of the Baltimore fan base. I think that at some point they are going to turn against their team. They're not going to give a fuck about any protest or injustice or anything, because these people, they're not showing up to a game to see a protest. They see enough protests in their news feeds or even in their schools that they're done with it. And I'm showing you this. It says Dez Bryant responds after Shannon Sharpe criticizes his take on race relations in America. This was back in April, when Bryant said that I don't think that race is as big of an issue as people make it out to be. And then Fox sports analyst Shannon Sharpe, two-time Super Bowl winner. I think he might even be a three-time Super Bowl winner. I'm not sure. I think he might have won with Baltimore, one, two. He for sure won two with Denver. He criticized Cowboys wide receiver Dez Bryant's take on race in America, in which Bryant encouraged people to lead by example rather than allowing the biases of society to weigh them down. It says, I've been racially profiled on numerous occasions, but not once has it influenced an ill feeling inside me about anyone outside of that issue. Real slavery is different from what's going on in our world now. Sharpe said on his daily show on Tuesday that though he once felt the same way as Bryant does, his views have evolved over time. He says, I came from a very difficult background also. I think a lot of people know my story. My grandmother raised her 9 kids and raised my mom's 3, Sharpe said, and I thought a lot of the same lines earlier in my career that Dez is thinking. I made it out, why can't you? And then one day while sitting alone, I started thinking, what about the person that didn't have Mary Porter as a grandmother? I've already gone through this. And Bryant said that Sharpe had twisted my words. All I can say to you, to your response, is you have to want to make a change. I speak from hurtful experiences. I programmed myself to try to avoid all excuses. I chose a different way to lead by example. So not to get too far in depth on this issue, because I still want to get to the NFL comedy issue. Dez Bryant, I think when he came out with that statement, and I'm not in the community, and it's not really my space to say, well, Dez Bryant's absolutely correct. I mean, I could virtue signal all day about it. But I think objectively, if you look at Dez Bryant's life story, with his mother being suspected of when he started in the NFL, I think there were some Miami Dolphins scouts that asked him if his mom was turning tricks as a prostitute. He had one of the worst home backgrounds of any player entering the NFL draft when he got drafted. I think it was 2010. And he's come certainly a long way. It definitely was not without a lot of shaky periods when people thought, oh, this guy's going off the rails. There was, I think, an issue with a landlord one time, an issue where he was in a violent altercation with his mom. But over the past 2 years, you really see him kind of solidify into a more stable and veteran player. Maybe he's not one of the most elite receivers in the NFL anymore, but he's certainly a force to be reckoned with. and you don't see these stories leaking out anymore about him, getting into altercations with people, or the cops stopping him for. I mean, there were stories back in the day. Um, and then Shannon Sharpe, he's just on TV all day, every day, complaining about racial issues. So, with all due respect, Shannon Sharpe, this is somebody, he's always talking about how there should be freedom of speech of people to talk about race in America. Well, Dez Bryant's using his freedom of speech. Dak Prescott also said he doesn't identify with the protest, using his freedom of speech. Alejandro Villanueva, same thing. Today, Keith Olbermann, that banshee retard on GQ, comes out and says everybody should be kneeling for the anthem and protesting. All the players should be kneeling and protesting. Well, Keith Olbermann should know that by now, nobody in the sports world listens to him anymore. Why is it that he can't get a job in any sort of sports capacity when he built his original career on being an ESPN Sports Center host? Nobody cares what he thinks because he just spouts off garbage, mostly political nonsense, and everything else he says is just a bunch of virtue signaling like nonsense. He's an idiot. And Shannon Sharpe is not far from being just another Keith Olbermann. It's not whether he's a black Keith Olbermann or Keith Olbermann is a white Shannon Sharpe. They're just two people that they automatically go and politicize everything that they do. And it's sad for. I mean, Keith Olbermann can kiss my ass because he's an idiot. Always has been a media whore and always will be one. Shannon Sharpe is kind of sad because this is a guy, he had a great career, fantastic talent, but he really does not know how to separate politics and sports every once in a while. I'm not saying never comment on politics, but when your entire career is now all about politics and sports, then I think that you're kind of becoming a cartoon version of your own self. Uh, and then once again, I mean, I'm not going to go without saying this. These athletes that are protesting now about the NFL and the national anthem it's hard to even remember that this is about police violence and the death of black men in America. But none of them protested at all when the NFL removed their team from St. Louis, where the original protest began with the players running on the field with their arms raised. Well, how many of those players protested when the NFL actually removed the team from St. Louis and let it move to LA? That whole protest, it was meant to symbolize the Michael Brown incident, the Ferguson incident. Well, what happened to that? There is no NFL team in St. Louis anymore. Apparently, these NFL prima donnas, they think that they're doing such a huge service to the community. How are you doing a service to the community when you're leaving the community in order to go to a different market where apparently you can make more money? That doesn't sound like a real civic protest in my mind. It sounds like a bunch of phony nonsense. So, aside from the NFL, I want to talk a little bit about the Mel Brooks comment saying that political correctness is ruining comedy. Yeah, absolutely. It's been said already. And in fact, in this San Diego Union Tribune article that I found, it's not just that Mel Brooks that says that. Jerry Seinfeld, he said in a 2015 radio interview with ESPN's Colin Cowherd, the Seinfeld comics said politically correct culture is hurting comedy. Yes, it is, he said. I don't play colleges, but I hear a lot of people tell me, don't go near colleges, they're so PC. And then he said the same thing on Late Night with Seth Meyers. Well, I was just watching, this came up because I was watching on Netflix a special with Jerry Seinfeld where he goes back to his roots. This is a guy, he got into show business kind of breaking a lot of these barriers of what is, what is comedy itself. He started doing that observational comedy. Eventually the show about nothing. Instead of focusing on real topics, he's focused on topics that don't matter. Uh, who would think that that strategy would have made him one of the most successful sitcom comedians of all time? Maybe the most successful. I'm not sure if he was the most successful or not. But Jerry Seinfeld, probably one of the top 10 comedians of all time, stand up or otherwise. And yeah, he's talking about how PC comedy ruined everything. And in the actual show, he talks about how, in his day, those jokes where in our days we didn't even have handlebars on bikes and whatever, that type of stuff. And it still sounded, it sounded fresh because there's a person who knows how to do the delivery, he knows how to do the, he knows how to play to the audience, how to read their reactions. But you cannot even use those talents if you limit the bandwidth of what content you're allowed to use. And that's what I think he means about political correctness. What he means, what Mel Brooks means. If you start saying the topics, saying about any topic, that topic, we're not even going to talk about that because some people may get a little uncomfortable about it. Yeah, by that time, when you start using that sort of standard, and I'm not saying that every topic in the world is, fire away. I'm sure that there are certain topics that are too disgusting or idiotic that they shouldn't be covered by comedy. But as a free speech absolutist, I'd say that the vast majority of topics should be completely open, even racial topics. The fact is that the best way to judge a comic that you don't like is to usually gauge the audience reaction. And in many cases, these comics just get booed off stage. They bomb, and then they learn from that. Oh, this isn't really the humor that people really want. It says here, Gilbert Gottfried, following backlash over jokes he made in 2011 about a tsunami that killed thousands. Here, there's a great example. Killed thousands of people in Japan. Gottfried complained about the ills of political correctness in a 2014 essay in Playboy titled The Apology Epidemic. He says, imagine if the most brilliant comedians in history were working today. They'd never stop apologizing. Charlie Chaplin would have to apologize to all the homeless people he belittled with his Little Tramp character. Dennis Miller, he's probably said enough. And then Daniel Lawrence Whitney. I didn't know that's the name of Larry the Cable Guy. He complained as early as 2006 in a 60 Minutes interview in which he argued that political correctness was going too far. He says it's gotten way out of control. I really think that we're at a point in this country where people really need to take the thumb out of their mouth, and grow up a little bit and realize there's a lot bigger problems out there than what a comedian did a joke about. And then he made a skit about it. And then there's some other ones, Chris Rock, John Cleese, and of course Mel Brooks earlier. But yes, political correctness is ruining everything in this country, and especially if you want to talk about two entertainment fields, comedy and sports. But wait till they get to your workplace. You don't work in those industries, so you may be able to joke in your own workplace right now about things that you find funny, or opine about things to one another. But do you think that it would be so far-fetched to think of a society where even in your own workplace you're afraid to say what you think about any given topic? But some people already have workplaces like that, not for reasons of political correctness, maybe because it's just a unpleasant, hostile workplace. I've been in places like that before. But you do need to you need to understand that if we allow that type of culture to permeate throughout society, where there's a culture of silence. There's just this acceptance that certain topics will be verboten, they'll be forbidden. Then that could happen to your workplace. You could end up being in one of those miserable jobs where people are constantly looking over their shoulders and watching what they say. So that's it for tonight. It's Ramon and Bold Like a Leopard. Let me know what you think. Like this video, share it, and stay tuned for next time.